Go, by the way.
Welcome, everyone. Today is our September 2023 Sisters in Crimes Off the Shelf. This is a monthly program that we designed to unite our reader audience with a published author to get to know them on a personal level, ask them questions about their life and their work, about their stories and their writing process, and hopefully get their books off the shelf and into the hands of our readers. Before I introduce today's author, I want to encourage everyone to just jump right in and join the conversation, to raise your hand, speak up, put something into the chat. Anything is fine. I do hope this will be a very organic conversation with us all chatting with our author and asking questions. So to get us started, I am Dawn Gepfer. I'm the host of Off the Shelf, and today we are talking with Lexi George. She's a published author from Alabama, and by day, she works in the legal field. She also is an editor, and she's a playwright and a mom and a mom. And when she's not doing all of those things, she writes. And I have to read a quote describing what she writes because there's just no better way to paraphrase this. And so Lexi George writes sexy, snarky, paranormal romance set in Alabama about hunky, immortal demon hunters and the Southern women they love. And I think that just is the epitome of what I've learned about Lexi's series, her demon hunting series. And I'm so excited to chat with her today. Having a demon on our program as a character or a storyline is a first.
Oh, okay.
So welcome, Lexi.
Well, I am so excited to be here. Good morning to everybody. Clarification, the demons in my books are not the biblical demons that we typically think of. They are more like dementors. They're incorporeal wraiths, and they go from dimension to dimension, and they possess people because they like to do all the bad things and party and drink and smoke and, canoodle and other bad things. And then the heroes of my books are kind of like bounty hunters that go from dimension to dimension, rounding these demons up and putting them back where they belong so they don't cause complete and total chaos wherever they land. And it just so happens that they came through a portal and ended up in a little town in South Alabama and started causing all kinds of issues. So that's the first thing. They're like I said, they're more like wraiths than the
I will tell you, that's what I was thinking.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking that. And so would you say they're more mischievous than criminal?
No, they're evil in the sense that they are, well, not evil, that's not the right word. They are without remorse. They are users. Think of them almost like locusts. They come in, they want to be in bodies to have fun and do all the things they can't do as incorporeal beings. So they're not nice. No, they're not nice. And that's why my demon hunters round them up.
So before we get too deep into that series, I'd like you to introduce yourself to us. I would love for you to, I call this part of the program the backstory. I'd love you to tell us about who you are aside. I kind of touched on a few things, but if you could go a little bit more in depth and tell us who you are aside from being a writer.
Well, I grew up in a small town in South Alabama actually outside of a small town in a little place that had one flashing light and one country store. My mother was an English teacher. My father was a lawyer and then a local judge. I always liked to write. I wrote really bad poetry in high school and college. And then I went to law school, and anybody who's ever been to law school will tell you if you have any creative juices in you, it sucks every bit of the marrow out of your bones. So I got out of law school. In my 30s, I started having a story in my head. I would put myself to sleep telling myself this story. And then eventually the character started talking to me on the way to work and during work. And it got to be where I thought I need to write this story down. And that's how I started writing. So the first thing I ever wrote was not a romance, although I love romance. My favorite genres have always been romance of all flavors, fantasy, and science fiction. Um, but I started writing this fantasy, and that's what I taught myself to write on. I had never, of course, I'd had English classes, and always been a writer, but I didn't know what I was doing, and so I learned. I'm self taught, and then I joined RWA back in the mid 2000s, and they had some really great craft classes. And I took a lot of craft classes, and I just kept working and working and working. And I tried to sell that fantasy. And back then, self publishing was not what it is now. It was on kind of on the cusp of that, and I couldn't even get anybody to look at my fantasy. Back then, you had to send a query letter to an agent to try to get an agent because you couldn't get to a publisher without an agent. It was this catch 22. I couldn't even get anybody to look at the book. So after 140 rejections on my little beloved fantasy, I said, okay, universe, I hear you. I need to write something else. What else am I going to write? So I came up with this idea about a paranormal romance about demon hunters. And I don't know, I just decided to make it about demon hunters who come to the deep South and fall in love with Southern women. I liked the juxtaposition of this very serious, humorless alpha male type that can technically speak any language because they have, like, think of it as a computer chip in their brain that allows them to go anywhere because they go everywhere from dimension to dimension after the demons. But they can speak English, but they don't speak Southern. So the other thing I wrestled with as a writer was people always tell you to write what you know. And I was a lawyer and by day, and I didn't want to write about the law. So all of a sudden one day it dawned on me, you know, small towns, write about small towns. So it was kind of a organic thing with me. I had to figure all that out. And so the small town in my books is really a character in and of itself. And I'm from Alabama. I went to the University of Alabama, undergraduate and law school. So when I was naming my town and naming places, I kind of borrowed things from the University of Alabama and kind of peppered into my books, not like, in your face kind of things. Like, for instance, and I'm dating myself here, but when I was growing up, there were two football players, the Hanna brothers, for the University of Alabama. That's why Hanna, Alabama, is named Hanna. And the county seat in my county is Bear County, Behr. Of course, Saban is now all that in a bag of chips, but when I came along, it was Bear Bryant. So there's little nods to my alma mater in there, but not in your face, because I do live in a state that's divided between two warring factions. You're either one on one, you have to declare that you put it on your birth certificate when you're born. Are you for Auburn or Alabama? It's the law. So I try not to be too obnoxious about it, but I just had a lot of fun writing this book. The first book was it's called Demon Hunting in Dixie. And let me tell you this about my so-called writing process. There are two kind of writers. There are plotters and there's pantsers. And of course, a plotter has everything all figured out ahead of time, and a pantser doesn't know what the heck they're doing. And I fall into the latter category. So I usually come up with a title for my book, and of course, the main characters and the general overall premise of what's going to happen. But that's it. And I just kind of start writing, and things happen from there, and characters show up that I don't anticipate. And sometimes they kind of take over the story, and I have to beat them back into submission. But I wrote this book, and I that's what actually got me published, was the paranormal romance. And it's actually more of I would say it's higher on the fantasy end, because that was what I was writing before I wrote the paranormal romances. So I have multiple points of view in my books. I write in third person. I usually write some chapters from the heroine's point of view because they are so different. The heroine is this Southern girl, and the hero is this alpha male. Think very medieval, almost knight kind of thing. So I usually have multiple points of view, a chapter from her point of view, a chapter from his point of view. And I just had a really great time writing it. And when I started out writing this book, the first book, Demon Hunting in Dixie, I thought it was going to be very angsty and serious and, darkly purpley romance. And I even had a very dramatic title for it. It was going to be called Dark Encounter, because the hero and the heroine meet when the hero saves her from an attack by a demon. And then at the end of chapter 1, the dog started talking. And I thought, this is not a dark encounter. What am I writing here? This is a demon hunting in Dixie. And that's how it came. I'm telling you, we're all connected to some hive mind up there, because I get downloads and I don't have any idea where they're coming from. So that's how I got started. And I wrote the first 3 books, and then I wrote 3 more, and there's 6 in the series and a novella. And it was just a whole lot of fun. Each book is a standalone with different hero and heroine, but secondary characters march through. You see, it's like going to a family reunion or a high school reunion. You see people from the previous books, but the story is focused on the hero and the heroine in that book. So, because that's what drives the story in a romance, is the romance. You can have all this other stuff in there. You can do anything you want to, but the central thread of the story, just like in a mystery, the central thread in the mystery is who did it, who's the murderer, who killed them. Well, in a romance, that you got to have that love story kind of has got to be the backbone of the whole book, and you can weave all these other things around it. But at the end of the day, that's the meat of the story.
So do you consider yourself more of a romance writer than?
I consider myself, really, I write fantasy. It's just some of my fantasy has sex in it, and some of it doesn't. So the 2 that I wrote first that I never could get published didn't have any, boing, chicka, boing, boing, didn't have any of that in there. Because my then 10-year-old was reading it over my shoulder. And I was like, okay, no naughty bits in this one. So the fantasies don't have sex in them, but the paranormal romances do. So I'm really kind of a multi-genre writer, I guess.
So I want to jump somewhere now. I want to go back to your profession. You're a lawyer. You were a lawyer, and you're writing something that is really, I would say, out of character of a public persona as a lawyer, and then this private author persona. Was there ever, because you just said you had to kind of change something because your daughter was reading over your shoulder, and so did that also, the fact that you're a lawyer in a small town, did that influence also what you wrote and how you put yourself out there as the author of these stories?
I was very careful. That Lexi George is a pen name, and I was very careful to never say where I worked, just that I was a lawyer. I never identified which department I worked for. And I tried to keep my professional life and my writing life totally different. I have a personal Facebook page that my high school friends and my family can see me on, and I have a Lexi George page. And I try to keep them totally separate. And I did that partly because my then married name was unpronounceable by most people. I have since gone back to my maiden name for lots of reasons, but one of them is because you don't get that panic look on the nurse's face when they step out to call your name. You always knew it was my turn. I'm like, it's me, because you couldn't say my name. So, but I really wanted to protect my children because they were young when I got published. They were both still in school, and I've been very careful to keep it separate. And I did not want to write about the law, because that's what I did all day. So, and also, I will say this, the kind of law I practiced, a criminal appellate law. So all I saw all day long was crimes, bad crimes, really horrible crimes, all the rude things that people do to one another. That's what I read on the daily. That was my daily diet. So when I sat down to read or to watch a movie or to write, I wanted something that was fun and made people laugh. That's always been my goal, is let's have a good time. Let's laugh. So that's kind of how I handled the situation. I kind of always think of myself as a writer who ended up being who was a lawyer, not the other way around.
Right.
It's funny. Okay. I identify more, my inner self is a writer more than a lawyer, although I enjoyed practicing law.
Charlie?
But your real name is Alexandra Webb?
It's actually Jean Webb, and the A is for Alexandra. Yeah. Yeah. That's my real name. Now I'm out there for everybody.
Mhm.
And I am, I'm actually from a small town in South Alabama called Atmore. And then I moved after I graduated from law school, I moved to Wetumpka in the 80s and got a job in Montgomery. And it was really funny because if anybody that knows South Alabama, there's a casino in Atmore. And shortly after I moved to Wetumpka, the Creek Indians opened a casino in Wetumpka. And I was like, they're following me. Not really, but anyway. So the town in my books is a hodgepodge of the two towns I'm from. Anybody who's ever been south of Montgomery can tell you that it's flat as a flitter, right? You can stand on an anthill and see for miles. Okay. And I've always loved hills and mountains. And when I would visit North Alabama or North Georgia, I would just be in love. So Wetumpka has a little bit of a ripple here. I think we're at the tail end of the Appalachians. And so I took the river in Wetumpka and the hills, and I took the flat South Alabama and put them together and made this fictional town.
Let's talk about that town a little bit, because it is I think of it as world building. You're not just the multi-dimensional world that you have to build, but you also created this fictitious town, and that is a constant in your stories, right?
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So again, you just said that you're not a plotter, you're a pantser. So I would think that needing to keep the consistencies as you're developing your town, how do you keep up with it? How do you manage everything?
It's hard, and I keep notes, and I have a book Bible that a very nice woman painstakingly went through my books and I kept one of my own, but she went through and did an extensive book Bible, or I couldn't keep it straight. And I still have to go back and look, because I can't remember when I was writing book 6, which is the last one I've written. And it was a long process over 13 years, or no, not that long, 10 or 12. I couldn't remember who knew who. Have these people met? And if they did, where did they meet? Does he know about this? Does he know about her? Because in my town, you've got a regular normal town where just normal people live. They have no idea that there's supernatural woo-woo all around them. So you've got people that don't know about the magic, and then you've got the people that are supernatural. And so I had to figure out who knows what. And yeah, it's a great question, because character names, and especially when you make it up as you go along, you'll make up a character name or a detail, and then later on you might not remember that. And you have book Bible, book Bible, book Bible.
When did you start? I think you said that somebody did that for you.
Yeah.
So did they put that together for you when you were writing the 6th story, or did you realize earlier in the process, like, oh, I gotta?
I started when I got my second contract for books 4, 5, and 6. I realized I already had 3, and I'm like, I'm starting to get overwhelmed by all these different details, and different characters have different abilities. They have different eye color. They, different backstories. So I reached out to somebody who started me a book Bible, and she has not done 6. I need to get back with her and get her to do 6, add 6 in, but it saved my bacon. I really started that process of keeping an index, is what I called it, when I wrote the fantasy that I mentioned, the 2 fantasies that I wrote, that I learned to write on. Because it was a fantasy and I was world building, I made an extensive index for myself so that I could keep up with things, because I was making up words. I was in another place, in another world. So I would make up these words, or these crazy words, to go in this book, and then I couldn't remember what it was. So I had already started that process, and I had kind of a book Bible started, but this lady did a fantastic job. She went through and she pulled it out. She did a chapter by chapter breakdown. For anybody that writes series, you reach out to me, I can give you her name. I can't remember it right now because I have no brain cells and I hadn't had any coffee, but she's awesome.
I was going to mention that because Liz writes series, as does Jeff. Jeff has a reoccurring characters, but Liz has an actual series of people. Same thing, same small town. Liz, do you do anything like that?
Yeah. And I actually paid someone to do the first one, to set up the first one. and I've kept up with it. It sounds like I'm a little bit more techie than you are, Lexi, with the
That's not saying
spreadsheets.
a lot.
But yeah, in fact, my editor, the editor I worked with, used to always send me a list of names. I also have a spreadsheet of names. So I had started that previously, and I incorporated her lists of names. Every book she edited, she would send me a list of all the character names.
That's
So I
amazing. And the editors, I had different editors at Kensington, and they did the same thing. I forget what they called it, but they do have a list. You're right, and so that all helps. But you have to have something, or you'll lose your mind trying to remember it all.
Yeah, and sometimes I was in it the other day. I'm like, I had a character with that name. I don't remember that, but then it could be because she would list, just you gave a waiter the name, or or something. You named someone like that.
Which I think is why some writers recommend that you don't name every single character in your book, unless they're a
Yeah.
secondary or important character, because then you get into that issue.
Yeah,
So
and I've gotten to the point where I'm even like putting in pictures of buildings because, they have a certain look to them, and that's going to be part of the story. So you know what you can do? Mine are in a Word document with tables in it, and you can cut and paste pictures and stick them in one of the table cells. And, I have one character she's pretty over the top, so I'll dress her in kind of crazy things, even because, like, if you look up designer clothes, some of them are really ugly. Some of them are really like, I would never wear that, but people who are impressed with labels, they might. So I'll put her in some kind of funny designer thing, and I'll save the picture of that, the designer shoes, or the designer, like I found this one thing that was like a flowy pantsuit kind of thing that had a flower right on the crotch. And I was like, oh,
oh,
she's gotta
lovely.
wear that. That's just hysterical. This big, like,
Okay. All right.
green
Bullseye.
flower. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah,
Wow.
I do a lot of I think another reason I'm a slow writer is I do a lot of research on and things like what a building looks like, or
Right.
what they would be wearing, because I'm not a fashionista. And
I'm
so
not either.
I'll go and look up, what's current right now to see what my characters need to be wearing or whatever. And I don't usually do name brands, but although I do have one snooty character that is actually a ghost who's really very snobby, and she wears designer clothes. So I have to go look up designer clothes
Yeah.
for my bitchy ghost. Um, but yeah, I spend if anybody ever looked at my search history, they would think I would put me away somewhere, I'm sure, because the things I look up, I think that's just the nature of writing. If you write, you're going to be researching, and you're going to look up some very disturbing things sometimes.
Now,
Yeah. I mean, we had our last meeting was all about arsenic. So yeah,
Right.
that was
Right. And my last book 6, The Demon Hunting with the Southern Sheriff, there's murders. There's a mass murder, basically. And so I had to look up all kinds of things about, what state the body would be in if it'd been 3 days, and all the things that mystery writers look up. I did all that. I had to call a friend of mine who worked for the local police department down where I'm from and say, hey, do y'all still use the codes, like, like they used to on Dragnet and the old stuff, and, talk to him about what the codes would be for this, that, and the other. I had to do a lot of that kind of stuff that I had not done before, because I was dealing with an officer of the law. It changed my research.
speaking of that particular book, there was something else I thought that changed in that story. And that was, you have a male main character, the sheriff, and the demon hunter is a female demon hunter.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was
when I first started writing the books, the Dalvani are the male demon hunters. And then as I came along about book 4, I thought, being a little feminist here, I thought I need to have some female demon hunters in here. So they are called the Kirvani, and the Dalvani and the Kirvani get along like cats and dogs. They are siblings, basically, that can't stand one another. And the Kirvani think that the Dalvani are just, they just make a mess everywhere they go, and they have to go clean up after them. And the Dalvani think that the Kirvani are pains in the butt. So the heroine in the last book that I have written is she's basically the head of the Kirvani. She's high priestess or whatever you want to call it. And she was fun to write because she is very powerful. And I got to do all the fun things with her that I had done with the male demon hunters. And that is, she has feelings for this man and she's baffled by them because they don't do that. They don't have emotions. They just, they do their job. That's what they were created for. And so she is very baffled by her attraction and her not her attraction to him, but her feelings for him. So it was a lot of fun to write, and she's really a kick butt character. I like her a lot.
Okay, so you have 6 books in this series, and you had also written the 2 fantasy books initially, or self-published them, right?
Right.
And you had mentioned previously that you're in the process of, number 1, you had to regain the rights, and number 2, you're looking into self-publishing. Can you take us back in time and tell us, like, I was very confused about needing to regain the rights to them. What happened?
Oh, well, I wrote them and never could get anybody to look at them. And then I wrote 6 books for Kensington in the Demon Hunter series, and they eventually bought or published the 2 fantasies. And that's why I had 2 pen names for a while, because the fantasy is a different genre and they didn't want to confuse my romance readers. So I had another pen name, Alexandra Rush, and they got published. And quite frankly, they're great books and I love them, but they didn't sell many copies. It's kind of a crapshoot with publishing as to whether something gets traction or not. For whatever reason, the books never got traction. They didn't sell a whole lot. So after I looked at my contract, and after so many years, I was able to ask them to give me my rights back, and they did. Some publishers won't, but Kensington was very generous and gave me my rights back. So I have been in the process of trying to get, I've decided to drop that second pen name. That's too much sugar for a dime. I cannot keep up 2 Facebook pages, 2 web pages, 2 personas. That's too much of a split personality for me. So I'm putting them all out. When I release them, they're going to be out under Lexi George. And I'm going to, of course, make sure that people that have read them before, I don't want anybody to think I'm trying to snooker them. Oh, I read this book already, I'm going to put in the front, this was previously published as Alexandra Rush for those people who had read it. So that's how that happened. I got my rights back, and I'm trying to get them back out there because I love them.
And do you want to talk about those a little bit more, since they are up and coming? I know you've got something else in the works. You've got a work in progress you wanted to tell us about. But
Sure.
Before we go there, do you want to tell us a little bit more about the fantasy books?
Fantasy books are what I would call them epic fantasy, because there are romantic themes in there, but they're not romances per se. But like I said, there are romantic elements. And it's the story of a young woman from South Alabama who's been sick her whole life. And her aunt has taken her. She's raised by her great aunt. She's been taken to doctors, and nobody can tell her what's wrong with her. All she knows is she's dying, and nobody can tell her why. Well, her aunt passed a few years earlier, and she's 25 years old. She's living in her aunt's house. She's sick, and she starts seeing things. So she just naturally assumes she has a brain tumor, right? Because she's seeing men in the dresser mirror, ships in the dresser mirror. She goes downstairs. She decides, I'm just going to go have a drink, even though she doesn't drink. I need something to settle my nerves. When she's in the library downstairs, a wizard steps out of the library mirror and tells her, basically, classic portal story. Hey, you got to come with me. My Tandera is where I'm from. We got a bad wizard on the loose. You're the only person that can take him down. You got to come with me. And of course, she says, like any normal, responsible, that she basically said, are you crazy? But he ends up sucking her back through the portal. So I love portal stories. I love the Wizard of Oz. Remember when the door opens and it goes from black and white to color in the Wizard of Oz? I love that whole thing. So she's now in this place in her pajamas. She goes from Alabama summer to winter. She's in her pajamas, and she's on the run from an evil wizard who wants her blood. She doesn't even know why. So as the book goes along, it's called A Meddle of Wizards, because wizards meddle in things they ought not. And like the one that came through the library mirror and took her back with him. And as the story progresses, she finds out that she has some powers. Of course, she's terrible at it. She sucks as a wizard. But it's this, coming of age kind of story. And so then the second book in the series is called A Muddle of Magic. And it's her story. And I will just be honest with you, I'm still working on book 3. But it's just a really fun story. There's a soft-hearted giant in there that cries at the drop of a hat. Of course, there's hunky warriors, because all my stories have hunky warriors in them. There's a grumpy troll. There's all kinds of magical creatures. I grew up loving myths and fairy tales, and I just have a whole lot of fun peppering my stories with all these mythical creatures that I grew up reading, just eating books up about. I love The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and of course Harry Potter, but I love fairy tales and Greek mythology. So there's a lot of that in that book. They're a lot of fun. There's always humor in my books. All of my books I just can't help it. That's just the way I write. That's my voice. I don't set out to do it. It just happens.
Well, I think just from your personality, with us chatting with you, we definitely see you're very witty. So it doesn't surprise me that you carry that into your writing. Going back to your chosen profession as a lawyer, there's probably not a lot of opportunity to be witty in your work, is there?
No, not a bit, especially when you're dealing with the dark and the macabre side of life. Like I told you, all the rude things that people do to one another. And I think that was my knee-jerk reaction to that. And I think a lot of times people that are considered to be funny, it's a self-defense mechanism. When I was growing up, I was very tall and skinny and had big feet. So you're going to be bullied and picked on, right? So you make fun of yourself before anybody else can. So I think I just grew up, and my dad was oh my gosh, my dad was the funniest human being that ever walked the planet. And I just grew up with, learning to be that way. And it just came out in my writing, which was a big surprise to me when I started to write, because they always tell you that you have to find your voice, whatever your voice is as a writer. And I never had any idea that mine was going to be humorous and zany, and kind of over the top. And back to the Demon Hunter books, there's a funeral parlor scene in book 1, where the heroine runs the flower shop in this small town, but her brother and her mother run the funeral home right across the road. So she's over there putting flowers out for a man who has died, who was the town philanderer. And she goes over there and his body's not in the casket. So they've got a missing body. And then the wife comes in, the widow, and she wants to know what happened to her husband. And my heroine says, well, we don't know where he is. That's the problem. He's gone. And the wife immediately says, oh, he's been raptured. And the heroine says, no, we don't think he's been raptured. Of course, I'm Episcopalian, and I'm pretty sure we don't get raptured. But we think somebody took Dwight's body. And she's like, well, I don't know who that could have been. And then she went, and that's when the mistress walks in. Oh. And the widow and the mistress get into basically a brawl, a rolling cat fight in the funeral parlor, and men, close your ears because it's going to hurt your feelings, because the widow has cut off her husband's most important part and put it in a Ziploc bag because she didn't want him messing around on her in the afterlife. So the mistress and the widow are fighting over the weenie in the bag. That's how serious a writer I am.
I think I love it. Mary Palmer, I want to ask you a question real quick, because Mary is also an attorney and she's a reader more than a writer. Mary, you're muted, just FYI. So when you're choosing your genre to read, do you ever feel like Lexi, that like you had so much structure in your profession that you're kind of looking for something maybe to take you away from that as a reader?
No, I actually, I love the John Grisham books. I like reading books that feature lawyers, but not exclusively, but I actually enjoy it. I just, my book club just read a book, and there's a lawyer in it. I mean, there's a criminal defense aspect, and sometimes you're just picking apart what is obviously wrong with it. You know,
Right.
like, did you even talk to a lawyer before you wrote this? Because this is so far off. And and that's part of the fun, I guess. And then also finding books where, you know, they just do the legal scenes, the courtroom, because I was a trial lawyer.
Okay.
And not that we often went to trial, but you're getting ready to go to trial. And so, yeah, I find that really interesting.
Well, I know what you mean because I was never I was an appellate attorney, but when I watch television, police stuff on TV, it drives me crazy how they do things, and you're like, that would never stand up in court, or you can't get that DNA evidence back. You know, sometimes now after COVID, it takes 12 months to get DNA evidence back, but they somehow get it in 48 hours.
Yeah, in an hour sometimes, right?
Yeah, and even labs, even you can't culture something that fast. You can't find out if it, you know, no, I can't watch any of that stuff just because when I went through chiropractic school, we had to learn microbiology and we had to go into a lab and culture things and wait for them to grow and stuff. It's like, no, that's not how it works.
Oh,
One
yeah.
thing I wanted to ask Lexi about, because when I, you know, like Dawn mentioned, I'm a reader, but I really started out in my early adulthood thinking I was going to be a writer. When I became a lawyer, I actually wrote or read all day long. You know, you're reading other people's briefs, you're responding to them, you're reading discovery, you're writing letters to your client. And my writing just stopped completely. And so I have so much admiration. Obviously, you were writing books while you were practicing law. That's amazing to me.
Well, I snatched every moment that I could up. So y'all, I'm sorry, I'm having cat interdiction here. I'm on my screen porch and my cat just barreled in here and jumped up on the cat tree. That was what that racket was. I would sometimes, I mean, I wrote in my bed at night because my kids were in the living room blaring the television. When my younger daughter was always very active in theater, and she would be at school in a play and be in rehearsal till 9 or 10 o'clock at night, I would sit in a Starbucks until they ran me out to try to get my writing in. Of course, Saturdays and Sunday afternoons, every chance I got. And then when I was on deadline with the publisher, sometimes I would just have to take a week of vacation and just hole up in my sister's house because it was quiet. She lives 4 miles from me. I'd leave the kids here and I'd go to my sister's house and write, you know, 12 hours a day until I got it done. And it's hard. And it's hard now because I am balancing so many things. I'm still working part-time and I'm editing for other people. And I am active in my community theater and I am trying to write. So like most mornings I get up by 6 and I get me a cup of tea and I sit down and I try to get an hour or two of writing in, because when I come home, I'm tired. And the muse is like, So if I don't get it done in the morning, and then on the weekends and on holidays, that's when I really hit it hard. I have stopped writing in bed. I did that for many years because that was the only place I could write that was even semi-quiet in my house. But I soon found out that my brain thought when I was in bed, I was supposed to be writing. So I could not turn my brain off. So I stopped writing in bed. I try really hard not to do that. My older daughter is living at home right now. She works from home. And so I've given her my office. So I write at the dining table or out on the screen porch where I am now, to try to not do that because that was terrible. Not smart.
You had mentioned earlier that the story that you ended up writing initially was playing in your head, like you went to bed at night thinking
Mhm.
about it.
Mhm.
And yeah, so it was on your mind.
Writers are crazy. They hear things in their head and they talk to people. And the
Yeah.
fun thing, the most fun thing is when a character shows up. I mean, for me, and everybody's different. There's no right or wrong way to write. But my process is a little bit nutty because people will show up, characters will show up, not every book, but once in a while they'll show up and they're like, hello, I'm here. I'm not going away. And that's the fun part to me. And then the other thing that when you get to the end of the book, because I am a pantser, and I think I have a rough idea all right, book 2, for instance, Demon Hunting in the Deep South. The heroine is a very shy, withdrawn woman, and the book opens up with a murder. The woman that was her nemesis from high school, she walks in her office and the woman is dead on her desk and there's blood everywhere. So it's a murder mystery within a romance because she's obviously the first suspect. So there were characters that showed up in that book that I did not expect. That character that I killed off was in the first book. She was mean. She was based on my older daughter's high school nemesis, who bullied her unmercifully all the way through high school. So I put her in my book and killed her. And then she showed up in every book thereafter as a ghost. She will not leave me alone. But there's also in book 3, Demon Hunting in a Dive Bar, the door opens up into this shifter bar and this guy walks in. He looked kind of like Willie Nelson, with like a Grateful Dead t-shirt on and long gray hair. And he just basically opened up the door and walked in and said, "Hey, I'm Toby. I'm in this book." And I didn't know Toby was going to be in the book. Now, that doesn't happen all the time. Most of the time, my characters are formed. But every once in a while, you'll have that weirdness happen. And so I'm always amazed when I get to the end of a book and all of these things that have been swirling around in my lizard brain kind of come together and make sense. It's a kind of magic to me. That I can't explain.
It sounds like magic. Honestly, I think it sounds fascinating. And to me, it's encouraging, to hear, because a lot of the things you're talking about, I experience, but I'm a reader, not a writer. And like Mary said, I think I might write, eventually or someday, but just to turn my work brain off and sit down and try to actually write, I'm struggling with it. So maybe eventually I'll have that epiphany like you did, and I'll feel so compelled to get something down that I'll actually do it.
Well, keep a journal, jot down ideas when you get them. For a long time, I don't do this anymore, but for many years I kept index cards because this was old school, right? Not everybody had a laptop and all that kind of stuff. I had a box of index cards and I would jot down character names when I thought of them, or ideas or plot points. And just keep you a journal of some kind, and because you won't remember it later. I can tell you that. I've had so many brilliant ideas in the shower or in the car and thought, oh, I'll remember, and I don't. So, and the main thing is, if you want to be a writer, just put your butt in a chair and go for it, because that's the only way you're going to learn. It's not, when I started, I thought I had this idea in my head that writers were like concert pianists. And they sat down and the words just flowed and they were connected to the infinite and the muse and the word. And it was just easy. It's awful. It's arduous. Most of the time, it's just a slog and you get stuck. If you're like me and you're a pantser. Now, I can't speak for plotters, but if you're a pantser like me, you get stuck. You get your characters up a tree. You don't know how to get them out. And that's why. Okay, another thing is, a lot of writers write drafts, right? They might write 6 drafts before they're happy with a book. That's not the way I write. Probably because I wrote appellate briefs and I had to hand something into a court. I didn't have the luxury of doing drafts and drafts and drafts because we were on a deadline with the court. So when I write, I don't move on to another chapter until I'm happy with the one I'm working on. And that I revise as I go, is what I'm saying. And so I might look at a chapter 6 or 7 times before I'm happy with it. And every time I go in there, this is part of my world building secrets here. When I go in there, I layer. So like I write a chapter and something happens, and then I'll go back and I'll put dialogue in that might tell something about the character, or I add what the wallpaper looks like, or what the food they taste like, or what they're smelling. I don't do all that at the beginning. I layer it as I go over each chapter. And that's just my process. But everybody has their own process. I have a friend that writes multiple drafts. She wants to vomit it all out and get the story out, and then she'll go back and fix it. And then when I get to the end of one of mine, I go back and I go from the beginning, because I'm such a slow writer. By the time I get to the end, I've forgotten what's at the beginning. And I go back and I do a final draft and make sure everything, is hunky-dory and meets all the, is matches and stuff. So
since you write that way, when you do send it in, do they send it back and say, we need you to change this or change that, or do they just kind of, they like what you've done and it's good
I
to
have
go?
never had to rewrite a story. Now, but I'm not, and I'm not bragging. I'm not bragging. I'm not saying I'm the world's best writer or anything like that. I had a fabulous editor at Kensington, and yes, they make suggestions or they might have some questions out, but I have never had to rewrite, which is a God's blessing because it would drive me insane. And I have I have a writers group, and I have a friend of mine who's had to do that many, many times. She wrote for Harlequin, and she would have to rewrite things completely, and it made her pull her hair out. So I am genuinely blessed that my editor gets me.
Yeah,
She just
no, I
gets
mean,
me. She
yeah,
likes what I write. Yeah.
we hear that a lot, you know, and we have some writers that are in Sisters in Crime that have talked about sending their book in and then getting these suggestions and really having to like eliminate things or reorganize it. So it's, yes, you're very blessed.
I am, and I'm spoiled. I'm just a brat. I mean, I'm just a brat. I lucked out. I'm patting myself, thanking my lucky stars, all my angels and everything, because I have so many friends that write, and that is their experience, is having to rewrite things, and it's
Yeah,
torturous.
that's what
It's
we hear.
torturous, and it's
Right.
demoralizing too.
Oh,
It's you know, I've watched writers really struggle and grieve because they had to go, and the hardest thing I think sometimes is when they want more. They want you to flesh it out more. If I know I have a writer friend who writes short, and it's hard for her. That's the way she writes, and she does a good job at it. And it's hard for her to add stuff. So it's a painful process, and I'm very, very fortunate.
mm-hmm. Well, we're actually running out of time, but let's get more present day.
Okay.
And tell us about these plays that you have written and you're performing in.
Yeah, well, back before COVID, I'm in a local theater group here. I've always been in community theater, and we were looking for something to put on. We were trying to get a children's play, and for whatever reason, it fell through the cracks. They couldn't get it. And I just said, with complete and total hubris, now that I look back on it, oh, I'll just write something. I'd never written a play. So I wanted to get something that the story, because we were on a time crunch, right? So that's my acorns falling on my tin roof. So I love The Wind in the Willows, the story. If any of y'all have read that story, it's all about animal characters, and set in Edwardian England. And it was the story's in the public domain. So I didn't have to worry about copyright. Hey, lawyer coming in here, that's where that came in. So I basically retold the story of Wind in the Willows and used that storyline and made it into a musical and called it Once Upon a River. And we put it on right before Christmas, and it was so much fun, and the kids loved it. And I have now written a Christmas musical, a sequel to that, called Once Upon a Christmas, with the same characters. And it is also a musical. And then back in January, the Encore group, which is a bunch of retired people that are interested in being in community theater, we got together and we co-wrote a story called, it was a funeral farce, and it's called Goodbye Leroy. And it's about a no good hound dog of a man. And it's at his funeral, and all of his girlfriends and his exes and his mama show up, and chaos ensues. So that was that. And right now I am working on a book. It's an urban fantasy. I say urban, but it's set in my same rural southern county. But they don't have country fantasy, so I'm calling it urban fantasy. But it's the first time I've ever written in first person. So I've always been a little bit afraid of first person, simply because in all my writing, I've never done it. But I'm really enjoying it. It's really fun. And it's the story of an expatriate elf who gets booted out of Alfheim because he's falsely accused by the queen of seducing her, and the king wants his head. So he comes through the veil to South Alabama, and he runs the security for a casino down there. And the casino has a norm side where the normal people go, and then there's a paranormal side where the supernatural creatures go. It's his job to make sure that they don't intermingle, because they don't want the norms to know about the paranormals. And he's at home one night stress baking, because that's what he makes cookies when he gets really stressed out. So he's stress baking, and there's a knock on the door, and there's a vampire standing at his door, and he's asking for sanctuary from the Bloodfather, because he accidentally ashed the Bloodfather's son, got him blood drunk and left him out in the sun to melt, basically. So that's the story I'm working on right now, and it's called The Trouble with Vampires. And I'm about 3/4 of the way through with it, and I am so excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. I hope people will like it.
It's still in Hannah, or
It's in Hannah adjacent. The name of the county is Bear County, and the casino is not in Hannah, but Hannah will be in it because Hannah's in all my books. But so far, it's just been in the casino. So and he just got out of the vampire den. He had to go into a vampire den after a human girl that was taken by the vampires. So I finally got him out of the vampire den and back to the casino. But it's a lot of fun. I'm having a great time writing it, and I'm enjoying stretching my muscles, as you will, and learning to write in first person. I don't know why I was intimidated by it, because I don't know, but it's just, you're just telling the story,
Right.
just, instead of third person. But anyway, I hope people like it. It's got some romantic elements, but it does not have sex in it. So that's also the two things I find the hardest to write are battle scenes and sex scenes. I don't have a problem with dialogue. Some people hate dialogue, or they hate backstory, or they hate world building. I don't have a problem with any of that. But when I write a battle scene or a sex scene, it takes me forever. So that's one good thing about this. Now my readers may be disappointed. But I met Peggy Webb many, many years ago at a Murder on the Menu here in Wetumpka, back before I was published, and she started out writing romance, and she's a big mystery writer. And was back then. I suppose Peggy's still writing. Anyway, she was going from table to table introducing herself to readers, and somebody asked her why she didn't write romance anymore. And she said, because she said, I got tired of writing about creamy white thighs when my thighs are not creamy. Think about her a lot, because I'm like, yes, I don't have to write a sex scene in this book.
Well, Lexi, before we shut down, I want to open it up to our audience if anybody has anything they'd like to ask or comment on.
I have a question. You were all talking when I first logged in. So you got the rights to your fantasy books back. Are you self-publishing them, or what are you doing?
Yes, I plan to release them next year. And I was just telling them that I've only ever self-published one book, and that was a novella called The Bride Wore Demon Dust. And it is set in my Demon Hunter world, but now I've got the rights back to these two fantasies, and I'm going to be self-publishing in them. And I do not know what I'm doing. So I'm just going to be upfront. I'm not business savvy yet. I hope I've got a lot of, there's going to be a huge learning curve for me.
Were they already formatted though? And I guess, so a lot of the work is already done.
Yeah. I've got a friend of mine in my writers group who's she's young and she's very prolific, and she knows how to do all of that. And so she has formatted them for me. God bless you. And I've gotten somebody to do some wonderful covers for me.
Okay.
So I'm excited. I'm just going to, like I said, re-release them under Lexi George, because the other pen name, it's just too much trouble to have two pen names, two Facebooks. Back in the day, I had two Twitters. So everything's going to be under Lexi George now, and I'm excited about them. They're really fun books. I hope they find some readers, because they're the book of my heart. So I love all my books, but since I basically teethed on those and learned to write on those, they have a special place for me. And I got to go back and write that. When I finish The Trouble with Vampires, I'm going to go back and write the third book in that series, because I kind of left my heroine in a bad place. So I need to go back and get her out of that dark road she's on. So.
Well, I have enjoyed chatting with you and walking down this path and becoming more and more intrigued about the demon hunting series, as well as your fantasy series. Thank you so much for joining us. I know you have a lot going on. One of the reasons Lexi and it took us so long to schedule her off the shelf is because she's got a really busy personal life, which includes her daughter getting married. And today, when we checked in with each other, she's like, oh, I have an engagement party that day. But thankfully, she's still carved out time to meet with us. So I'm grateful.
I'm so grateful that y'all reached out to me. I'm excited and I've loved meeting all of y'all and anybody that listens to this. If you have any questions about writing, I want to pick my brain about anything, feel free to email me. You can find me on Facebook. I have a website. I love to talk about writing. As you can tell, I will bore you to tears. I'm very passionate about it. And so I love all things writing and readers, and y'all just reach out anytime. And I've loved being here, even though I had to get up and put makeup on for y'all.
Charlie?
Well, you're going to be at Murder in the Magic City again, right?
Yes,
You're
I'm
always-
usually the moderator. Yeah, Margaret Fenton couldn't do it a couple of years ago, and she asked me to do it, and she was like, you know what? I think I just want you to do it. My friend Tammy Lynn is very involved in Murder in the Magic City, Murder in on the Menu, which is our Wetumpka event. And Tammy used to be in my writers group until she moved. She lives in Georgia now. So if y'all
Does
ever
she?
want me to come, yeah, she lives in Woodstock. So I have a place to stay. If y'all ever want me to come speak or do a program or anything, I'll be happy to, because as you can tell, I love to talk about writing. But yeah, I'm going to be at both events and it's really fun. And when I first started doing that, I was kind of hesitant because I thought, you know, I don't write mystery. And then Tammy said, well, you have mysteries in your books. And I said, well, that's true. I do have a mystery in almost every book. They just have romance too. So, and I mean, writing is writing. And when I belonged to RWA, there were so many writers from different genres that joined RWA because of the craft classes. Writing is writing. Good writing is good writing. So I love meeting writers from all genres. And it's a really fun event. And we just have a really good time.
Well, we're hoping. Go ahead, Charlie. I'm sorry.
No, I was saying I'll see you again there. So
Yeah.
Jeff's going to be there this year, I think. So.
Well, and that's what I was going to say is we've been talking about it so much amongst us in the group in the Sisters in Crime Atlanta that I think we're probably going to have a pretty good presence there. Some of our authors are going to be on panels, and I think some of us are just going to be in the audience, which is what I love to do. So
Well, come hug my neck.
Oh, we will.
And give me some questions, because I'm always looking. I feel like a lot of times I ask the same question. Of course, the panels are different, so it's not the same writers, but I feel like I ask a lot of the same. I try to come up with a game or something to make it more interesting so people aren't just bored out of their gourd. So if y'all come up with any clever, you know, questions or things you want to know as a reader, you know, let me know, because and I need to come join y'all. I need to come join Sisters in Crime.
Come
Because
on.
I do have my daughter lives in Atlanta, my younger daughter. So and I have a friend in Woodstock, so I couldn't come to every meeting, but I could come.
Well, we do our meetings on Zoom.
Oh, well then I could do that. Well, I need to just
Do
join.
that.
I need to join, because you just can't. You got to feel the well. You got to feel the well with other people that read in your genre, write in your genre, understand the love of books, whether you're writing or reading. And if you don't feel that well. And that's one thing I found out as a writer when I got all. You asked me how I did everything, and the trouble. I was a voracious reader. I read 2 to 3 books a week, and then I got published, and something had to go, so I quit reading for pleasure, and for a couple of years, and I realized I can't do this. I can't write if I don't read. So that's when I discovered audiobooks, because I was going back and forth to school and work to take my kids, and it was perfect for me to be able to listen to a book on the way to work and on the way home. And I still do that when I go walk and everything. And anytime I'm in the car, I have an audiobook going. So I love being around readers and writers. So
Deborah Goldstein is a member.
oh yeah, I know her. She good. I like her. She good. She good.
But you're welcome over here. So.
I would love to be a
Absolutely.
part of your madness. That would be fun.
Yeah.
Good.
Yes. All right. Well, that's exciting. Thank you everybody for joining us today. We will have this program on our social media within the week. And thanks so much.
Can I
And
just, Dawn, can I interrupt you?
sure.
I just wanted to remind members that next month, October 14th, we'll be at the Blue Ridge, is it a craft fair or whatever that's called?
Book fair. I think it's a book
I
fair.
don't think it's a book fair, but
Arts in the park.
arts in the park.
Arts in the
Okay.
park.
Free art.
And
How's that?
because of that, and because Lance is going to be there, we are not meeting at the library. So it will not be a hybrid meeting. It will be a Zoom only meeting. And then after that, November 11th is our workshop, and that will be in person only. We might Zoom parts of it, but that's not in the works really. It's an in-person workshop at the Decatur Public Library. So that's the
And
stuff.
next month, Liz Lazarus and I are going to do a thing on guns, knives, and blodgers.
Oh, I need to pick your brain sometime.
Yeah. So just watch your email.
Well, I'd welcome any questions you have that you always wanted answered about guns. I know Jeff's a good gun person, and several others know about guns. Liz does, but we want to know what people want to know to put in their books that is accurate information and not crap. So basically, that's where we are.
Where were you when I was writing my sheriff? I needed all that kind of stuff.
Here.
That's one thing I had to ask my friend is what kind of guns do most policemen carry? I didn't know.
I did a PowerPoint on firearms for authors at Killer Nashville a couple months ago, last
Yeah.
month. So
I bet that was
That was
awesome. I
fun,
need to start going to that.
Yeah. So, and now we've got Reader Rendezvous coming up first Saturday. Edie Peterson will be the moderator on that, and I'll be there. But Reader Rendezvous is fun. We send out that invitation to a wider array of people.
Yeah.
It doesn't just go to members. It goes to about 150 people, 140, 150.
Wow.
So anyway, if you're interested, show up for that.
Yeah, and keep your eye on email because October will be nominations month. So we're trying to get more people involved on the board and in our committees. So we might be hitting you up for anybody up to get involved and to grow our chapter and get more people and their knowledge so that we can keep providing more, I want to say services. I'm at the office right now. It's not services.
Well, I want to thank y'all again for including me. This was a wonderful opportunity, and I've loved every moment of it.
Thank you
Good.
for joining us.
thanks for joining us.
Thanks. Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Bye. Y'all have a
Bye.
great weekend. Bye.